Are we waiting to get started?
Jessica, are you? Taking a roll or counting?
Yes. Do we have Director Gonzalez today? I don't think I see him yet, the chair.
Our pre-meeting took a little bit longer, so he might just be running a minute late signing back on.
Okay.
Look at that fancy picture of you, Jennifer Ivey. How do I create a picture like that?
Yeah, it's like,
Well, first you have to be technologically challenged because my camera, although it worked this morning, is now rejected by my computer. But then if you just go into settings, you just like right click and you add a picture and then see I look fabulous without even having to try. So.
and Mark, don't take this the wrong way. Mark, don't take this the wrong way, but I doubt you can create a picture like that.
Yeah, you got to have something to work with.
Well, I mean, Mark, you could just start using my picture. That would be funnier yet.
This is a rough crowd.
I'm going to do that, and then they're going to be like, "Why you look a lot like Jennifer Ivey?" It's we're brother and sister.
All right, Rick, do we have a quorum, or who's checking for a quorum?
I'll go ahead and do the roll call and name off all of the directors for you that I see, and then if I miss anyone, let me know after I've called everyone's names. So I'll go ahead and start. So I see Holly, Chair Gonzalez, Mark, Director Wayne Williams, Director Geisinger, Director Avila, Director Newberry, Director Carpenter, Rick Bev, Miss Jennifer Ivey, Mr. Andrew Gunning. Is there any directors that I missed that are, I think John Graham, I think, is on the line as well. Did I see him?
Yep.
There he is.
I think we have all 9.
Do we have the other Williams?
Both Williams.
Both, okay.
Yes, the other Williams is here.
All right. So if you'll just remember to mute your mic if you are not speaking, that way it doesn't pick up background noise when someone is talking. You can use the chat feature or the icons to raise your hand or indicate that you want to talk. That helps us out. And then just say your name when you're making a motion. Thank you.
Okay, so it looks like we have a quorum. So I call this meeting of the PPRTA Board of Directors meeting to order. We have established a quorum. Review and approval of the agenda. Has everybody reviewed or comments on the agenda?
I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Okay, have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Commissioner Waller seconded.
Thank you. Thanks.
Any opposed, say nay. And that passes unanimously. Okay, item 3, public comments period for items not on the agenda. Do we have any from the public who want to comment or called in? Okay, hearing nobody, so it sounds like we have not had anybody call in or send in any questions. Okay, to item 4, approval of the minutes for the July 8th, 2020 meeting. Any comments or questions or changes for the minutes?
I move approval of the minutes.
Second, John Graham, Manitou.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the July 8 minutes. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed,
Aye.
say nay. Hearing none, that passes. Item 5, Citizen Advisory Committee Monthly Report. Sure, who's presenting? Is this Jim or Reb?
It's me. I got to unmute. Sorry.
Okay.
Board met, the CAC met last week. We discussed the city's contracts and recommend approval for the city's request of their 10 contracts. El Paso County presented one. Likewise, we recommend approval for that. And same for Manitou Springs, brought forward a contract, and we also support their request. Was about it, with the exception of item number 10, the RTA 3 workshop. As you guys discussed last meeting, the series of back and forth between the CAC and the board to begin to discuss some of the RTA 3 issues. We were given a list. We were given topics for these workshops that had 6 items on them. And I would say that we probably spent an hour and 45 minutes or 2 hours on just this portion of our agenda. And everyone kind of had a chance to see the list and discuss it. And then I narrowed it down to focus our discussions on just 2 topics. So we chose for last week's meeting, item number 2, the A and B list, and item number 3, the which year, where our discussion focused on last week's meeting. So there was no consensus on any one topic or issue. There were some pretty good general feelings, and so we don't have a recommendation to bring forward to you at this point. So I would like to try to summarize some of the discussion for each of those 2 areas. So I'll start with number 2, the A and B list. We discussed each of those things, a smaller A and get to the B sooner, no B list. If B list, get a grant, then move to A list. And then the item D, some limited liability to be able to move a project within some limits. So, excuse me. In general, the CAC wasn't sure what was wrong, or if anything, with the current A-B list arrangement. And so we weren't really sure what we were trying to address. If we just have one list, maybe just an A list and no B list, we did hear some of the directors comment that if the A list was shorter, we could get to the B list sooner, but we weren't sure why. If all of your high priority projects were in the A list, what's the advantage of getting to the B list? And also the wording in the current IGAs and the rules restrict moving to a B list item unless all A list projects are funded. So if using Manitou, if Manitou finished their A list and El Paso County hadn't finished their A list, then Manitou couldn't move to their B list until everything else. And the other comment was this RTA is a regional issues. And if the A list of projects represents a regional perspective, then we should focus on funding A list projects first under the assumption they are higher priority than B's, and not let another entity just go to a B list because they finished their A. Let's finish all the high priority regional projects first. So we did also discuss the input on, like we have done a couple of times in this current RTA, was if there is an alternative source of funds, like the Platte Avenue bridges, for instance, where you have a B-list project that now has an opportunity or federal funding, doesn't make sense to turn down federal funding just because that's a B-list project. If we can do that and get that funded. And the other one was the Fontanero Railroad bridges. We've kind of talked about that as well. It just makes good sense to do both of those bridges about the same time. And so we thought that having that flexibility, don't know that the wording needs to be changed. The board has on occasion made those exceptions based on the facts presented, and no one saw a problem with that. If they wanted to change the wording in RTA 3 to specifically allow for that, then we as a CAC wouldn't have a problem with that either. And then we also, when he starts talking about the building of the A and B list and the rationales on what goes where and whatnot, we felt like that having some of the member government staffs providing input and their need to maintain some kind of engineering flexibility on these project lists going forward. So that was kind of the general discussion around the A-B list project. So be glad to take any direction or comments from you guys on that before I move to the next one.
I believe Director Williams has a question.
Yeah, not so much a question as more of a comment. And part of it is the concern that when we did the initial RTA, there was such a pent-up demand that we had a really good idea of what those priorities were. The challenge as we've gone forward sometimes is it's hard to anticipate the next 14 or 15 years of growth and development. In a growing community like we have in the Pikes Peak area, what might be a priority now, we might not have realized the importance of it because we didn't know this particular area was going to develop, or we didn't know this opportunity would arise. And so, Jim, I think that's when you asked why there's that possibility of wanting to be able to do a little bit more there, it's a little bit of that flexibility to say, hey, it turns out this project really is critical to move up. And when we come up with a list, which is done, you know, we're talking a 2022 vote, but that means we're coming up with it earlier in that process. So it may be a decade later that we're saying, oh, we really have this B-list project that because of changed circumstances really is more important, or because of changed opportunities. So Jim, that's kind of why, you know, at least from the city perspective, why we were looking at it as a possible tweak of the RTA to just allow certain projects, a limited number of projects to move in while still providing that guarantee for the A list, but have that ability to say, oh, this area developed, we need this, it's now a priority, or as happened already, and we kind of tweaked it a little bit, this bridge is in very bad condition, we need to move it from B to A. And so that's why.
Yeah, and thank you for that clarification. And we did discuss that. It's very difficult, you know, as you said, the way the development moves. A developer comes in and decides he's going to do something that maybe we didn't anticipate him doing, or vice versa because of circumstances. And we all, I think, would agree that having the ability to remain flexible is important, but that the focus should be on the A list, and those exceptions should be considered, and maybe have some written criteria that we could fall back on to be able to tell the public, yes, we did move something from the ahead off the B list, but here's why, and that kind of thing. So we agree with what you just said.
Director Waller?
Well, I effectively no longer have comments because that's exactly what I was going to say. I'm good with the A list and B list as long as there's flexibility to move stuff from the B list up to the A list.
Okay,
I would even like to go as far, I don't know how to write this, but I'd like to even go as far as to allow something to be put on the list that had not been contemplated before, you know, in certain limited circumstances.
Well, we did that with the GAP project.
Yeah, but we had to go back to the ballot for that.
Yeah. All right, Director Geisinger?
Yeah, actually, Mark and Wayne both hit the issues that I wanted to hit. Jim, one of the things that over lunch that I was going to try to get to is you talked about the CAC members felt, at least the perception I got is they felt somewhat restricted by the current IGA and the current PPRTA parameters in terms of responding to these questions. I would suggest and empower CAC to say, here's things that we should consider for a new IGA and for PPRTA 3 in order to facilitate what Wayne and Mark just talked about. And how we write it, I agree that we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But don't be restricted by what we have. These are things that we're hoping to get to. Whether we get there or not, I don't know. But I agree with both Mark and Wayne in that regard. And I would empower CAC to say, figure out how we get there. Figure out how do we empower this. Here's a restriction that we currently have in the IGA. Here's a restriction that we have that we can't do GAP without going back to the voters. Here's how we suggest that we get that flexibility built in. Things like that.
Okay.
And this is Jennifer. Now that I've just heard you say that, now I understand where you're going at our pre-meeting. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Now I completely understand. Yes, I was answering within sort of the current handcuffs that we have in place, which is if you don't join by whatever date, you don't get any capital money, the A and B list, the sort of the constraints that we've had in place, all of which could be removed if all the member governments agreed. So yes, you're thinking much more outside of the box, while I was thinking within the box that we've had in the past.
I want to build a bigger box.
Yes, we're free to build a bigger box.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, Longino.
All right, Reb.
Yeah, two things. Number one, item number 3 on the cities list has a location map that does not match the description. That's just a comment. So even though it wasn't even brought up at the CAC meeting, I just caught it later. And the other thing is, I'd like to thank Jim and Rick for putting in the time to try and summarize a slew of comments. If it takes an hour and 45 minutes to make that many comments, they've made a concise presentation of what went on at the CAC, and I commend them for that. Nobody's name was mentioned, as Jim promised.
So let me move to the other one. We did discuss item 3 about the what year, and there's a little bit of bleed over into 4. The CAC had concern about the 2022, by going to the ballot in 2022, that a new member government would not have the time to get their own citizens to approve the tax, approve a list, and get all of that done prior to 2022, the timelines for submitting a ballot question in time for the 2022 ballot. And and we discussed the ramifications of not being approved if we why even numbers versus an odd number, and we also again, there was no consensus on this, but was there anybody banging on the door that we need to consider? And how do we work within the legal ramifications to get them? Because that was our understanding that if you join other than the approval period of time, you don't get capital money for the duration of that deal, and you only get maintenance. And so if a person can't join by the time we take it to the ballot for the next 10 years, they would only get maintenance or something. So we just, and then I brought up the fact was, if that is true, if that assumption is true that they have to be on the RTA renewal ballot, could an entity join and incorporate their list of projects in a separate vote after the voters approved RTA 3, similar to what we did with the GAP? So say in 2026, could a community do all of their preliminary approvals within their community and then request a ballot measure to have them included as a full member after the 2024 RTA 3 project started? So again, the cause and effects and the timing, the legal issues of and we discussed what happened in Calhan, and so we weren't sure that 2022 would give a new entity time, and then, so that was kind of the crux of that discussion there. So I can entertain any questions on that and get more specific if somebody wants.
Questions or comments?
This is Jennifer. I'll just repeat what I sort of said in our pre-meeting on this topic, which was, from a legal standpoint, there's no reason why the joining election and the capital renewal election couldn't happen at the same time. But there's several sort of practical and logistical considerations that make it a lot more cumbersome for the PPRTA. For example, we probably have to have 2 ballot questions, one being contingent upon that joining election being successful. That second ballot question would be the one that would contain the capital projects for that new member, which then sort of puts them at more risk because it's less likely that that contingent ballot question would pass. It also would probably be more expensive for the PPRTA having multiple ballot questions. So my practical and logistical advice is that it'd be easier under our, within our current box, if we're using that same paradigm going forward, that a new member join prior to November 2022, which they could do in this November's election, next November's election, or for some jurisdictions, depending on when their biennial elections are, probably in April or May of 2022. Now, Mr. Geisinger has brought up a very interesting idea, which is, well, why don't we expand the box that we live in? And there are definitely ways that we can do that, both in the capital renewal ballot question and in revisions to the IGA, both of which would be necessary. But there are definitely ways to make it easier for new members to join, which would change that answer in any variety of ways. So if I'm given the 128 pack coloring box and told to change where we're living, we can change this in any number of ways. It just depends on if the member governments would be willing to approve that in an IGA amendment, and whether that risks voter confidence if we change the paradigm from having a set A and B list or an A list that has to be completed before the B list. Those are all things outside of my pay grade, but that's my lengthy comment to that concern.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah,
I think David has one comment.
Yeah, I think this is the time, Jennifer, to talk about whether the member governments and between the member governments to figure out what the pulse is, if we want to have a different box, if we want to pull out a different colored crayon, so to speak, going back to your elementary school analogy. And so I would encourage CAC to really play with all the colors and to figure out what they would like to see. And then the other thing, just to echo, I said it was the end of August during our pre-meeting, but September 18th, we're going to have a joint mayor city council meeting, and we talked about issues to be addressed yesterday. The agenda has not been finalized, but one of the issues that sounded very important to discuss was transportation generally, and it's possible that we will be addressing the city and the mayor's position vis-a-vis PPRTA 3 as well. So that's going to be a public meeting, and people can certainly listen in if you're interested.
Okay.
Question.
Director Williams, I believe.
Yeah, this is Director Holly Williams. Just a question on other member governments, whether or not they're interested in joining. If, should we have them like reach out to Rick and ask them? Because like, what if the town of Monument was interested in joining? I think that they would want to know how soon they build up money, how soon they have something to spend. Those kind of, they would want some logistics before they even, wanted us to really consider inviting them.
Yes, and if I may jump in, and Director Williams, that was one of the other questions I was going to wrap with was on items 4, 5, and 6 and additional members. Do we have someone knocking on the door? Is there somebody that we would like to have join? And if so, how do we go about doing that? Do we put together a committee or a subcommittee of the board that goes and recruits folks? Do we put together a standard package so that has the information that you were just talking about in terms of, so that if someone asks, here's kind of the guidelines, here's some restrictive language, or here's language of IGAs that you've got all agree to, here's how the tax working money, here's how some of that stuff goes, and kind of just have a packet that could be distributed to prospective new members. And that was one of the things we would like to get some clarification on. So sorry to interrupt your comment, but I was going to get to that next.
No, I think that makes 100% sense because, I don't know, I think it was, you'd have to update me on the history, who joined after we initially started, if it was Green Mountain Falls or Rush. But I know it,
Rama.
And I know it just takes a bit to add up some funds in there, but what if Fountain wants to join? I know that the Palmer Lake and Monument have talked between each other about forming their own RTA. So it's not necessarily that they would want to join. I think they just want to know how long it would take them before they saw benefit from it.
Okay. Jim, anything else?
Yes, sir. I just.
Dave.
Go ahead, Dave.
I think I've already gotten to it, but I do think one of the questions that we talked about was an outreach and an availability to engage other people regionally, other jurisdictions who might be interested. So I agree with what Jim just said, what Holly just said, and we'll figure out how to go forward with that.
Yeah, I did have just a couple of things. So we want to move on in subsequent CAC meetings to item number 2, for instance, on program funds, item 4, 5, and 6. I think I understand from the board meeting how the board feels, or at least some of the members of the board feel on item 5 about improved cost estimates for some window of period of time. But for regional transportation issues, I have no idea. You've mentioned thinking outside the box, but I have no idea how to direct that. Is that directed at public transit You know, transit the community has grown, you know, 25%, and transit's still kind of, they've grown a little bit. But so what was meant by adding regional transportation? What are some of the things you'd like for us to focus on?
Okay, and
If
I
I
think
might, go ahead.
Director Williams had another comment.
Let me address a couple of those. So the regional nature, so when Pikes Peak RTA 1 was done, we included, I think, 2 CDOT projects, one of which was purchase of Powers right-of-way, and that had a set allocation, and we bought a significant amount of right-of-way with respect to the Powers corridor. And then the other one was, excuse me, a I-25 companion project, and I think along the Bijou area. So when we did RTA 2, I don't think we included any of those. And part of the challenge we have in a community, Jim, is that we have lots of major thoroughfares for which CDOT is the one that's in charge. But as PPACG can certainly report to us, there is a long backlog of approved and environmentally cleared projects that CDOT has no plan to fund because the state legislature, unlike our community, has not funded transportation needs. And so, you know, the question, one of the questions that we want you guys to look at and offer comments on is, to what extent should we address Powers Boulevard or Cimarron out west, or Highway 94 to Schriever? So these are state highways, which we have not typically done much with the RTA. We did through the addition of the GAP funding. But it's that question as we go forward: do we broaden the scope in terms of regional transportation? Because it's great if you've got a wonderful road, but if it then stops in a 30-minute backlog once you hit the intersection, is that really ideal? So that's the coverage with respect to the regional transportation. And then with the timing, I have a question for our council. You said it might require 2 issues. Couldn't you address that by saying, and we'll make him, and if Fountain agrees to come in, the Powers extension southward is added to the list? Couldn't you just do that within the question itself?
You could do it within one question.
Okay.
My concern with doing it in one question is I have a couple of concerns. One is whether you've somehow tainted the validity of your renewal question with the contingency language if Fountain doesn't come in. And 2 is more of a practical consideration of how confusing can a ballot question get. So I think, yes, you could craft that. I would want to look at a couple of legal issues to see if you've somehow jeopardized the legality of your question by having some contingency language in it. I think you can probably get around it, but I do think it would just add to the complexity and confusion of one ballot question. But that's just my personal opinion.
Okay. And I guess my response to that is that still seems less complicated than 2 separate ballot issues, because I'm not even sure how you run the campaign for that. Please vote for both, because we don't know if Fountain's going to come in or not. And then on the broader question of why an even numbered year, Jim, at least from my perspective, Pikes Peak RTA was passed and renewed during presidential elections. And so I think that we've usually done it in even numbered years. It's fared better. There is a broader electorate that votes in even numbered years. And then secondly, running it all the way up till just a year before, which is the other alternative, right? It's 2023, runs the risk of what happens if the people don't approve of that, because that then causes a wind down of all the projects, the reserves, and everything else. By running it in 2022, if some of the innovative ideas that some of us think are helpful are not accepted by the people, 2023 then would allow us to go back and say, okay, we've fixed the issues you didn't like. You liked the rigidity of the A-B list, and we'll go back to that. And if you wait until the last second to do it, which really the 2023 is, you take that away. And that to me is a much bigger risk than, oh, now there's a municipality that has been silent for 17 years that now wants to come into the RTA. So that's where I sit.
Yeah, and we discuss along those lines of 22, 23, 24. And I think that if there was a consensus during our discussion with the CAC, it was that we all felt like the public trust and respects what the RTA is doing, and that the risk of not approval was low. But you make a good point. If you and Jennifer have made, if we complicate it with contingencies and stuff, we're messing with what works, and that may impact us in some way. So good point there.
David?
Thank you, Lahinos. Yeah, Jim, you asked about what regional means, and I agree with everything Wayne said, but from my perspective, I think it's important to look at it from the entirely opposite direction, coming to the center, if you would. And it's the idea, we've kind of seen it, the maps that say here are the regional transportation corridors that, that are impacting our region. And then identifying the parts of those corridors that are not part of the PPRTA. So you're going to have the situation that Wayne just talked about is if PPRTA funds Powers all the way to Fountain that just lost the election doesn't have money to contribute. And so you have this wonderful corridor of Powers, and then we don't have a regional connection in and through Fountain because they don't have the ability to work with that, or how does that look? And that's why one of the things that I talked about is, do we want to reach out? We've had a citizen come from Woodland Park who talked about we need to get Woodland Park involved in this. A real question is Highway 24. Do we want to deal with that as well? So it's a question of looking at regionally. These are the things that we anticipate that are going to be corridors. It would include Mountain Metro, I think. How do we enhance Mountain Metro throughout the region so that we can get a better mass transit system throughout the region? If our box gets big enough and people come in and entities want to come in and do that. I'm going to throw something that's just the huge curveball out there, but Joe Gabler is on the Front Range Rail committee. And there's a lot of movement towards actually getting Front Range Rail, and Colorado Springs becomes part of that. What is PPRTA's contribution, involvement, participation in that, if in fact that becomes an issue? So I'm really asking, from my perspective, is really take a broad look at these are the transportation issues that the region is going to be facing in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And going back to what Commissioner Waller said, how can we build in the flexibility to respond to those issues when and if they come up?
Do you not think that having projects like say Powers extension to Fountain through Fountain that's outside the RTA, you think adding those projects could create a liability, because now people that have joined that are paying the tax that aren't getting something because we're now giving somebody something that isn't paying that tax?
And it's frankly, it's a little broader than that. It's frankly giving the PPRTA member governments an ability to go forward and say, this is what we're looking at doing, but for you to get the benefit of this and for this to be accomplished, we really would like you to come in and be part of this so that this can be completed regionally, instead of just like you were just saying, we're not going to have the ability to do this and it's going to benefit everybody along this corridor, but you're going to have to be part of that. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate the feedback, and we will pick it up. And then the other third point was, at some point, we would like to maybe have in this iterative process a joint CAC board meeting, maybe several of them as this goes along, to hear those comments firsthand versus being translated. And so maybe after another iteration, maybe first of the year or late fall, hopefully we could maybe do that in person versus over Zoom. But just know that the CAC is all for having a joint meeting.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Do we have any? We have to need a vote to accept the monthly report.
I move we accept the monthly report. This is Commissioner Hawley.
I'll second that, Mayor Graham.
Okay, I have a second from Mayor Graham. All right, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Okay, that passes. Item 6, financial reports. Good news, Bev, hopefully.
Oh, it's good news. Good afternoon. Our June receipts were $10,854,000. So we were almost $1,886,000 above the monthly budget, or 21%. To compare to last year, we were $1,024,000 above last year's June's receipts, or 10.4% ahead of last year. So we did quite well. There was very little receipts from prior periods, which is what we had the last 2 months, both April and May, that made those numbers so much larger than anticipated. But June was good.
Jessica, can we scroll to the financial numbers? Thanks.
I don't have the financials.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I forgot to send them to you, Jessica. I sent them to all the board members. I'm not able.
Sorry about that. Continue, Bev. I think we have them separate.
Okay. So we did quite well, and it wasn't because we were receiving old prior year and months receipts. So that is the bottom line for us. And El Paso County has the same type of increase from last year. I talked to somebody over there, so.
Okay, any questions for Bev on this? Okay, then item B, Bev, I think you're going to lead us through how to work through this budget amendment.
Okay, so the Citizen Advisory Committee made a positive recommendation to the board for the budget as it was presented last month. The Pikes Peak RTA staff recommends that the board chair open the public hearing to receive public comment on the proposed amended budget in accordance with board policy for public input. And after the board's discussion of the budget, the board may approve the resolution to adopt the amended budget and appropriate the funds for signature by the chairperson, vice chairperson, and board secretary.
Okay, so I guess I will be opening, at this time, we'll be opening for a public hearing for the budget to receive public comment and input, which then we will review and make a motion to approve. Bev?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm opening the public meeting at this, hearing at this point for public comment on this budget request, a budget amendment request. So do we have anybody in the public? I did see a chat comment from Jolene.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm Jolene Hausman with Fountain Valley Senior Center, and on occasion I speak to the board representing all the HSPs, and I want to clearly state this is only my opinion today for Fountain Valley Senior Center. And I'd just like to voice my concerns over the reallocation of the funds that Mountain Metro Transit is requesting. When planning the request, there was no communication from Mountain Metro to any of the specialized transit providers if any additional help was needed due to the pandemic. On April 20th, after the PPRTA board meeting in April, when Craig presented that Mountain Metro was waiving the fares for the general population, I personally reached out to Mountain Metro Transit to also ask that the fares be waived for specialized transit. Once I made the request in writing, the fees were waived through April 26th for specialized transit. In that same request, I asked for reconsideration of cost per ride as our cost skyrocketed due to one rider per vehicle. And all discussion regarding cost of trips to the pandemic was very clearly dismissed and never approached again. If Mountain Metro Transit is approved for the funds to recoup $673,643 for fare recovery, is that to cover fare recovery for the month they waived fares or for the entire pandemic? For all specialized transit, Mountain Metro Transit does not collect fare revenue. It is the nonprofit's responsibility to collect the fare, and I'm not sure how fixed route and paratransit work. Does Mountain Metro collect the fares, or does the contracted agency as part of their contract collect fares? If it is for the entire pandemic, will Mountain Metro Transit then be passing those funds that are reallocated to the agencies that actually lost the fare revenue during the pandemic, such as Fountain Valley Senior Center? And my last point is I also have concerns regarding the rerouting of money from sidewalks and bus stops to servicing a new route. The sidewalks and bus stops help our disabled and senior populations and make us a more ADA-friendly community. $717,555 seems like a significant amount of money over the next 3 years to split one route into two, especially given they are going to use electric buses, which will reduce fuel costs. Just splitting one route into two really costs $239,000 per year at the cost of ADA accessibility in our community. Thank you.
Okay, do we have Craig online to help answer those questions?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Craig Blewett, Director of Mountain Metro Transit. I was trying to write down notes as Ms. Hausman was speaking to try to catch everything. Number one, I guess in terms of the cost of the improvements to Route 23, Bus Route 23, it is splitting it into two segments, but it's also increasing the frequency from 60 minutes to 30 minutes on the northern segment and that is driven by the ridership that we've seen on that route. So that's why it costs $239,000 a year. That $700,000 figure is for that service improvement over a 3-year period. We are not redirecting funds away from bus stop improvements to fund that. Rather, these are PPRTA dollars that were collected in 2019 above the budget that have been allocated to transit. So we don't have to defund something in order to fund this. These were additional revenues. In terms of waived fares, our projection is that we are going to be down over $700,000 in terms of fare revenue for the year 2020. And so the 600 and some odd $1,000 that's allocated for that is to partially cover that loss of revenue. So it is for the entire year. It's not just during the month where we had rear door boarding in order to protect drivers, where we didn't collect fare. Rather, it's for the entire period of 2020, and that's our projection of 700 and some odd $1,000. I'm trying to remember the other aspects of the questions that were asked.
Craig, this is Lohino. So I think one of them was the replacement revenue. Would any of that go back to the different entities that stopped collecting that? So like in her case,
no, we don't anticipate. Yeah, we do not anticipate allocating that revenue to the human service providers. No.
Okay, and Jolene, what was your other? Was there anything else that was not addressed?
Well, my concern was that the fare revenue equally goes to everyone that has decreased fare revenue through RTA funds. And my question to the fare revenue was, does Mountain Metro Transit actually collect fare revenue from the fixed route and para, or is the contract written where it's similar to the specialized transit where Mountain Metro doesn't actually collect the fare revenue? It comes out of our budget.
So Lan Rao, our business administrator, is also on the line, I believe. Lan, can you help with that question with regard to our contracts with the fixed route provider and the ADA provider?
Oh, sure. This is Lan Rao, Finance Administrator, Mountain Metropolitan Transit. We basically, it's a complicated practice, but bottom line is we have relieved the providers from collecting the revenue, and we have paid them at their full cost without requiring them to collect fare for the same duration. We did not collect fare on fixed route and ADA. So they are treated the same.
My question was for the entire year, not just the period that the fare was waived for rear door boarding, but does TransDev collect the fares for fixed route and para similar to specialized transit?
Fixed route is different than ADA paratransit. TransDev operates ADA paratransit, and they follow the same practice in their contract as we have in HSP contracts. So yes, it is the same practice.
Okay, so my concern with the reallocation of the funds of recouping fare revenue is that Mountain Metro Transit did not lose any fare revenue for specialized transit. And I'm hearing Lan say it's similar for the other entities. It's the entities that lost the fare revenue.
We can go over this in more details, but the revenue that normally is collected by the ADA contractor is put back to operations, and it is deducted off their invoice, and we basically collect that revenue through the ADA contractor and put it back into PPRTA budget and spend it on transit operations. It is an accounting practice, but it is the same practice for HSP providers as in our ADA contract.
Jolene, when you collect when you were collecting those funds, did you pass it to Mountain Metro or did you spend it on your stuff?
So in our contract, we have to deduct $3.50 from every ride we provide as a fare collected under Mountain Metro's rules. All the service providers normally end up eating the cost, and we just absorb that cost as a rule because we will never tell a senior or a disabled person that they can't board the bus if they don't have $3.50. But it affects our bottom line. We do not return any of those monies to Mountain Metro Transit. We have to deduct it from our costs initially before we even invoice Mountain Metro Transit.
Okay, so the lost revenue is stuff you guys will be using for your own services, not passing it to Mountain Metro.
Absolutely, and the additional assistance would be of great help, being that transportation is down about 50% across the board, still up to 25%, just due to seniors and disabled being the most vulnerable population right now and staying home more than any other population.
Okay, are there any other questions from directors on this aspect? Or
So this is Craig Blewett. If I could just add a couple more comments. Again, Craig Blewett, Director of Mountain Metro Transit. So I think because of the coronavirus, the spending of the human service providers, the specialized transportation providers, has been down. So in terms of availability of budget, the budget has not been reduced at all for specialized transportation. And what we also did is we renewed our contract on July 1st. We actually carried over unspent funding from the previous contract year to this contract year. So that funding is still available for rides as could be provided in the future by human service providers. The other thing to mention, I know that CDOT is also providing some funding, I believe it's CARES Act funding, to agencies across the state that are similar to the human service providers. There are some, I think, 32 agencies across the state, and they are providing some funding for them as well, noting that there could be some impacts to budgets. So that's a good news there.
any other directors have a comment on this? Craig, one question that comes to mind then for me. On the electric buses, is it cost the same to run a route for electric buses as regular buses, or higher or lower?
So we expect it to be lower, is the bottom line in terms of operations. What we're doing with battery electric buses, very briefly, is we're doing a demonstration project with 4 to 6 buses to start out with. The buses that are assigned to Route 23 that we're breaking the routes up for was a competitive grant, and the battery electric buses are specifically for that route. So those are changes we do need to make in order to make that grant work. The reason we're doing a demonstration project is to ensure that the cost of operations and maintenance are going to be less. That's what we've heard, but it's fairly early in the process of running battery electric buses. And I guess just one more point, if I could make. 90% of the rides for seniors and people with disabilities in the region are provided by our fixed route bus service and our complimentary ADA service. The other 10% of those rides for seniors and people with disabilities are provided by the human service providers, which is an important 10%. But when we're investing in fixed route improvements, we are investing in rides for seniors and people with disabilities.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other public for comments? Okay, do we have any comments or questions from the directors? Okay, I guess Beverly, I close the hearing and then we'll bring it back to the directors for formal discussion. Okay, I will close the public hearing portion for the budget amendment and bring back to the directors for comments, questions, and any actual formal action. Anybody want to kick us off? Okay, I have got one comment then. You know, it's a little confusing on some of the aspects that were brought up there and how the money gets pushed back, re-brought back into the Mountain Metro and aspects. So all I can say is a general comment. You know, on this similar issue on CARES Act funding at the state level, I was very adamant that state dollar or CARES Act dollars get spent properly and, you know, not just backfill budgets. You know, we got to make sure that you're taking care of your services, make sure of all the aspect businesses and taking care of everybody. So my only recommendation to following up on that is if you got CARES Act dollars, you should be helping the services and the providers and everybody, not just backfilling budgets. And so that's just my general comment before we move forward. So any other comments by directors? Okay, Bev, what do we have? We need two motions?
Yes, we need a motion to approve the budget and appropriate the funds. It can be one motion.
Okay.
Chairman, Swain Williams, I move to approve the budget and appropriate the funds.
Second.
Okay, and I have a second. I believe that was Yolanda.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Yolanda,
okay.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, that passes. Item 7, 2020 capital maintenance and public transportation contracts.
Yes, Mike Chavez here with City of Colorado Springs. We've got several items to go over. I'll do that quickly. The first item we have is a final design contract for AECOM for the Black Forest widening.
And Mike, you are coming in a little broken, so I don't know if you can get them maybe a little clearer or closer to the mic. Might help.
Okay. Yeah, the first item I have is Black Forest widening final design contract for AECOM. Is that better? Clear?
Yes, a little bit better.
All right. And that is being split over remaining 2020 funds, and then we'll fund the remainder in 2021. And that's noted in the memo. Next item was we have a contract, construction contract for Lawrence Construction for the Platte Avenue bridges over Sand Creek. That is a split project where we have RTA funding for the A-list, I believe it was eastbound bridge, and then the westbound is funded by the grant. We got very good bids in. They came in about 1.9 million under the engineer's estimate, which helps us greatly. So we are awarding the contract and using the remaining grant money of 6.4 million. We'll need 2.2 of RTA for construction, and there's a little bit of city match there. We have a study. Third item is a study for Max Green. It's a study in the Old Colorado City area, a traffic study that will come back with some recommendations for improvements. We have a change order for HDR on the circle bridges. Get to that memo. Okay, so we had some additional work that we needed done to incorporate real estate services for some easement acquisitions, and then a little bit of design work on connecting the Greenway Trail to the to do some detour kind of design of detours for construction for the Greenway Trail, high-speed Greenway Trail on the project. And then we have some additional money, item 6 for the Cascade Bridge, which is over there in the Ivywood neighborhood. We had some additional design and construction work that we had to do due to some utility conflicts. And we're also using some safety and operations maintenance funds to do some of the curb work to put in some of the changes. We're going to turn Cascade into a one-way street and add some additional parking to help the neighborhood with the parking issues they've had. So we're using those funds to do that work. It's partnering with not partnering, but 2C is doing some maintenance curb work north of that area, and the safety money will be used to kind of make some of the changes to the parking between the bridge and Navajo Street. And then we're also adding some city funds to help take care of those unanticipated bridge changes that we had. Next item, we have a deduction to AECOM for their construction management. We're able to change kind of how that's being managed. And then, so we're going to reduce their contract on that. And then the next item is there's some additional work that we're giving to that we need to do for Wildcat on the Sierra Madre wormhole work. So that $550,000 that we're taking from the design contract, we're going to use that to supplement the construction contract and also add some enterprise funds, city parking enterprise funds, and some developer funds to just continue doing some additional work in that project. Next item we have is we've got some additional work that we're having keyway construction do on the pedestrian bridge. That is funded in part by RTA, and then there's some developer contributions for the rest of that work. This work on the bridge, the RTA portion that we're allocating still keeps us below the 4.6 million that was ultimately approved. So we're below that level. And then we're renewing the software license for the Centric software we use to track these RTA projects. It's an annual maintenance renewal, but we're bringing it to you because it was over the $25,000 threshold. So I think that's all we have. If there's any questions on any one of these items.
Any questions for Mike?
Hearing none, I would move approval.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, that passes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, B, El Paso County. Jennifer, you there?
Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County, County Engineer. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Board of Directors. Today we have one item for your consideration. It's related to our Beacon Light Road project. I think last October, in October 2019, we came to you with the preliminary design for the entire project. Today we're coming to you with a phase of final design. We are trying to advance the north part of our project, and hopefully you took a look at the packet because there is a map in there that identifies what portion of the project we're advancing into final design. We're doing that to be able to coordinate with CDOT as they do the interchange project. So we're hopeful to get to through final design, do some property acquisition so we can incorporate some of that work with in conjunction with the timing of the interchange project so that we can, one, save money, and two, reduce the impacts to the residents in this area. And then we will be following at a later date with the rest of the final design package for the remainder of the project. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions for Jennifer? Anybody want to make a motion to approve?
I would move approval of the Beacon Light Road final design package.
I'll second that. John Graham, Manitou.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve item B. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, that passes unanimously. Item 7C, Manitou Springs.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Board of Directors. Jeff Jones, Manitou Springs Public Works Director. The City of Manitou Springs is looking for your concurrence for a mill and overlay project. Scope of the work will be a 2-inch mill and overlay of 1 mile of roadway in Manitou Springs from our El Paso Manitou Avenue intersection to our Ruxton roundabout. This entire area consists of 2 lanes, 12 foot wide each, as well as parallel parking spots for the entire length of the identified area on both the west and the eastbound lanes. Additionally, all striping for the center lines, parking, turning arrows, and other existing street markings will be replaced, and new striping and identification markings will be reestablished. Bidding process was accomplished with a winning bid coming in at $200,330. Once we complete this project, the only project left to complete our corridor through Manitou Springs from arch to arch will be when the MAPS project is complete. And then we will have everything, our corridor complete all the way to the 3-mile stretch running through the heart of Manitou Springs. With that, I'll open it up for questions.
Okay, any questions or motions?
Yolanda, move to approve.
Second that, John Graham.
Okay, have a motion, a second to approve. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. And that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Item 8, other reports, City of Colorado Springs Transit Services monthly update. Craig?
Yeah, can you hear me again? Okay.
Yep.
Great. Again, Craig Blewett, Director of Mountain Metro Transit. Our report is in your packet. Quickly going through some of the aspects of the report. The local bus route service, again, year over year for the month of June, we were down about 49% compared to a year ago. Not unexpected, but our ridership system-wide is increasing slowly and steadily. So that number is, in terms of reduction, is getting smaller each month. In terms of our ADA service, 68.5% lower this year than last year, but I can say that that is increasing. So almost half of our ridership with our ADA service program is taking adults to day programs. And those day programs have been shuttered during the pandemic because of concern about spreading the coronavirus. Those day programs are finding a way to slowly reopen. And as they reopen, our ridership is going up. Today we had 221 rides reserved. That's still down about 53% compared to last year, but again, it's getting to be a better number just about every day. I should also note that, and I told you this, I think, a couple months ago, our ADA service provider had furloughed 19 drivers. They are looking to hire back 5 of those drivers. They're in process of hiring back 5 of those drivers now to take care of some of those additional rides. So that is good news as well. Our Taxi Choice program, again, is suspended, so we don't have any ridership there. Again, we're directing all rides to our ADA program. And once again, all rides that are requested are provided as required by ADA. Our van pool program has been heavily impacted by the pandemic. There are there's more people who are telecommuting, but even those who are not, most people who are part of our van pool program own a car and have access to a car. The reason they're taking our van pool is because it's lower stress and lower cost to them. And also it contributes to environmental issues and social issues. But they do have the choice of taking their car. And I think as pandemic concerns remain, I think that's still going to be impacting that program. Other than that, we have some current projects going on. We have the update in there regarding our North Nevada transit connectivity study, as well as our fall 2020 service changes. We have been working with Pikes Peak Community College. We were going to reduce some service there that was still sustainable through their charge on their student fees. But Pikes Peak Community College has, again, suspended in-class or in-person classes at least till January. So we're going to regroup again in December and decide whether to restore that route. And just a reminder, this was a decision that was made 2 years ago. We are rerouting route number 6. That's a route that serves the Fillmore corridor. We have, because of lack of sidewalks along Fillmore, we had that route was directed, if you're familiar with the Fillmore corridor, a few blocks off Fillmore. We go north on El Paso, go along 4th Street, come back on Hancock, and get back on Fillmore. 2 years ago, we made the decision to reroute to Fillmore and improve sidewalks along Fillmore, actually build sidewalks for the first time along Fillmore. We partnered with City Engineering on that with some of their sidewalk program as well. So we have sidewalks on both sides of Fillmore. We are going to reroute Route 6 starting, the service change begins September 27th. That's a Sunday. That service will be impacted starting on Monday. So that's good. We're going to be shooting straight down Fillmore. That's going to be better for our riders in terms of getting where they're going quicker. So we're real pleased with that. And it's going to be a general improvement for pedestrians along Fillmore as well. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, any questions for Craig? Okay, hearing none. Item 8B, City of Colorado Springs monthly change order and property acquisition report. Mr. Chavez?
Yes, is there any questions on the report?
Any questions for Mike? Okay, hearing none. 8C, El Paso County monthly change order and property acquisition report. Jennifer?
I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for Jennifer? Okay, items 9A, designation of posting places for meeting notices.
This one's mine.
Okay.
Each year, according to the board bylaws, it's required that the board designate posting places for meeting notices. And for the past several years, that's been the front bulletin board on the west side of the building and the PPRTA website. For security reasons, to tighten up the security access to this building, the decision was made that the west entrance should be closed as a public entrance. Is still available for employee entrance with a key, but it's the west entrance is locked. So, but a new outside bulletin board has been constructed on the downstairs west entrance. So it's requested the board change the physical location of the two locations to the east entrance bulletin board from what it had been the west entrance foyer.
I move approval.
Second, this Wayne.
Okay, I have a motion and a second from the Williamses. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Okay, that passes. Item 9B, PPRTA 3 workshop. This also you, Rick?
Yes, the board can continue the discussion that you had with the CAC report from Jim Godfrey. One of the items that was not on the CAC list was the regional map with the transportation corridors, which the board requested at the last meeting. So that was added for the board's review first, so that the board could have a discussion after looking at the maps that are included. But feel free to continue your discussion on any of the items, but at least the maps are there that were requested by the board.
Okay, so do you have any additional comments on the PPRTA 3 that we might have missed earlier, or Rick was asking or commenting on?
I guess this is Dave. I guess what I'd like to know is just generally, what does the board feel in terms of the next steps to take? I really appreciated the conversation and the impact or the input from the CAC. And I think that this is something that needs to get continued. I'd like to know from Andy what he sees PPACG's involvement in this going forward. And at some point, I think that the member governments are going to need to sit together to see where and how they want to proceed with this. So I think we are in a good place early on, but I just inquire as to what you guys and ladies think we ought to do next.
Okay. Andy, you get a response, and then Wayne has a comment after.
I guess my initial thought, we've talked about that a little bit internally, and I'm not sure exactly what the relationship or what the role of PPACG might be. Then, we can quickly pull together the other jurisdictions and maybe have a, briefing presentation, from Rick and I and the PPRTA board to those other jurisdictions and let them know what the benefits would be if they joined the PPRTA, what the calculus might have to be in their minds, if they wanted to give this some consideration, but then also talk about, regional transportation issues like you all have discussed before, the role of maybe PPRTA partnering with CDOT, potentially to leverage our resources to help improve some of the state corridors as well. And just talk about the regional mobility dynamics of our community, because nobody stays within one part of the region. We commute to different parts of the region and, go to recreate all over the region and so forth. So let me give that some more thought, but I was thinking in the short term, probably, Rick and I maybe sitting down, connecting with the chair, vice chair, Lohinas and Dave, and maybe kick around some options for next steps as far as how we do some outreach. And maybe it's with all the other jurisdictions at once, or maybe it's more selective and with a couple of them, maybe meeting with Monument and Palmer Lake in one shot, maybe Fountain in a separate conversation. So I'm not quite sure, but give us a chance to give some thought to that and then circle back to the chair and vice chair and look at some options.
Okay, Wayne?
So question on, there was mention of Woodland Park, and when we drafted this, we looked exclusively at El Paso County. But I note that Green Mountain Falls crosses the boundary into Teller County. And so is the Teller County portion of Green Mountain Falls part of the Pikes Peak RTA?
As I understand it, this is Jane Newberry, I'm Mayor of Green Mountain Falls. As I understand it, all of Green Mountain Falls is part of PPRTA. Okay,
so we already have at least this tiny little sliver of a portion of Teller County. And Woodland Park, of course, is right on the border of the rest of it. Jennifer, there's no contiguity requirement, is there?
I think so.
No, there's not a contiguity requirement.
Okay. So those were just the questions that arose when I heard of Woodland Park's interest, because I hadn't really thought of that before. And
just a surprise that I learned when I was at the DA's office is there's a part of Woodland Park that is actually in El Paso County.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that.
I had to prosecute a crime in Woodland Park in El Paso County District Court for jurisdictional purposes. I don't know if that's been changed in the last 20 years or so, but at least 20 years ago, that was a surprise.
Isn't that the part all the way up by Rampart Reservoir?
It is.
See, I know my county.
All right, any other comments for PPRTA 3? Rick, you have this as an approved, but I think it's just discussion, right?
Yes, I always put it at the higher level to give you that option. You can always defer to a lower option of action.
Okay. And then I don't hear anything in terms of being approved at this point.
This is Jim, Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Hey, Jim.
Ann Ash from Green Mountain Falls. We're talking about it expanding in Chipeta Park, Cascade, all of that. And she has been a big advocate of wondering why some of those uphill communities aren't part of the RTA, especially noted during flooding and some of the damage that we're paying for within Green Mountain Falls was caused by stuff uphill from them. And so just from information perspective to the members of the board, the CAC representative for Green Mountain Falls is consistently reminding us that some of those folks uphill need to be part of it. So just for what it's worth.
So just to clarify, all of them in El Paso County are part of it. Those are not separate incorporated communities. So just like Security in Widefield, just like Woodmore, those are communities within a unincorporated county, and all of unincorporated El Paso County is in the Pikes Peak RTA.
Yes, I understand that. Thank you.
And I have, this is Rick, I've inspected some chip and seal projects that were in Chipeta Park, so that the county did. So I'm, Jennifer, I don't know if you, Jennifer Irvin, I don't know if you have a specific memory of that, but I have a specific memory of that.
Jennifer Irvin, yeah, we are doing work in Cascade, Ute Pass, and other parts of unincorporated El Paso County up the pass.
Okay, thank you. Dave and then Jane.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I think is going to be a regional transportation issue. And at the mayor's meeting, for those who were able to attend it either in person or virtually, the mayor of Woodland Park was commenting on this. Access to ski areas and access to mountain recreation, I think, is going to increasingly flow through Highway 24, which is going to affect all of us. And so I do think that's something that at least we need to be aware of, because that is something that's going to impact all of us, which does give, you know, at least potentially Woodland Park some skin in the game to consider.
Okay. Jane?
So just to tag on to that, you know, in Green Mountain Falls, we know that Cascade and Chipeta Park are downhill and are in unincorporated El Paso County, but uphill from us is Cristola and Woodland Park and most of Teller County. They've been working with us for flooding, but it would just be really logical if that whole Highway 24 corridor from Manitou on up to Woodland, including Woodland, would work together on it. It just makes sense.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other comments on this?
Yeah, just one more. And Jim, I'm glad that you're still on. When do you see, or when does CAC see the need to meet and sit down with the board members to have what I suspect will be a virtual meeting, but to have the meeting to do next steps?
Kind of just talking off the top of my head, in terms of procedure, I would say that probably 2 months. Here's how I envision it, and again, I'm kind of shooting off the top of my head here, was that I'm going to take back to the committee the comments that you've provided to me on the two issues we discussed. And I think it would be prudent to continue to discuss those given the new additional information that you've passed along, like thinking outside the box, looking ahead and thinking at that. At the same time, we may try to pick up another one of the items on the list. But in the first 15 or 20 minutes, we were all over the page, everybody firing off on 2A or 6B or whatever, and we weren't getting anywhere or any consistency. So I tried to focus the conversation. So I think just procedure-wise, it'd be prudent to take back the information you gave. Let's try to solve one of those, come up with a consensus and a recommendation or something, or let them think on it and we move on to another one. So I would say at least maybe 2 more months. So we've got September and October. I'd say maybe by November, December, we get together in a joint. We may have something a little more solidified, if you will. Okay. I don't know, Reb, what do you think?
I have a question. Don't we really need to make some decisions? And if you're going to entertain, whether it's Woodland Park, Fountain, or Monument, or any of the other entities that might be interested, we make a decision so the other entities can plan accordingly, seek legal advice. That the item number 3, the board decides that they're going to have the ballot initiative, however it's worded, is a certain year. And it addresses things that Andy acknowledged when he responded, that PPACG is a regional thing. It includes Teller County. It includes parts of I think it's the eastern half of Park County and Teller County, I meant to say first, but Teller County and parts of Park County. And RTA stands for Regional Transportation Authority, as I understand it. And I guess if we knew that that was a starting point we set, then you can plan how you're going to approach people that are interested, such as Woodland Park, that has expressed an interest. And I understand that that South Town, what is it?
Fountain.
Yeah, I know that. I was being smart out. Any of those entities understand the parameters, and if it's a committee that comes out from PPACG and PPRTA that approach them, or if they approach us, the PPRTA, we can explain here are the ramifications. You need to consult legal advice or whatever. But you start with something, and it's, quote, make the CAC make the decision or whatever, and a recommendation for item 3, and everything else goes from that. And I'd like to give it back to Jim, but basically, I think you got to start with a starting point.
I think from item 3's perspective, from what I've heard, you as a board have said, hey, 2022 is it. So I'm not sure what we could add much to that discussion about when. And I kind of agree. I think that a member entity knowing what timeline they're dealing with would help them make a decision, or might help them make a decision. So on item 3, it just sounds like to me 22 is the date. But like I said, I can take that back and then get back to you next month, and maybe some additional comments on the AB list based on what you guys have said, and maybe a move on into the additional member. I don't know that the CAC has much input on that, other than we would entertain being part of, if you wanted to put together a subcommittee or something, of somebody to working on a committee to put the package together. I think that the CAC wouldn't mind being part of that. But again, that's up to you guys and the board.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Fred.
Thanks, guys. Okay, item 10.
Can I ask one more question?
Oh, Wayne. Yep.
Thanks. So Jennifer, one of the items that we had mentioned is, as originally created, the 2 large entities with respect to population, the city of Colorado Springs and El Paso County, which includes the city of Colorado Springs in terms of voting, each had a little bit more of the control of the board than the combined 2 small entities. If we wind up adding 1 or more additional entities, the smaller entities that might be 10,000 or 20,000 people together would have a larger role on the board than either the county or the city. What options do we have? I know in regional building,
where are you going?
In regional building, the small entities choose amongst themselves their person on regional building, and the city always gets one and the county always gets one. So Jennifer, I don't know if you're ready to answer that today, but if you could talk to us about what the options are. I know one of them is you could increase the county and the city to 5 each. But there are sometimes commissioners and council members who don't have the ability to make all the meetings. So I'd just be interested to know what our governance options would be.
So statutorily, any member has to have a board member associated with it. So for every entity that you add, you have to have at least one representative on the board. So in order to keep the balance, you would, as you were alluding to, have to increase the number of representatives from Colorado Springs and El Paso County if you wanted to keep that balance. You could not combine and say, you know, a smaller entity, Rama and Calhan, are going to share a single board member.
Okay. And then second, so the follow-up question is, does every board member have to have an equal weight to their vote?
I don't know. I will have to look at the statute to see if it requires a one vote, one person, or if we could weight voting in some way. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thanks for checking.
Okay.
Wayne, thanks for asking my question. That's part of building a bigger box. So I'm interested in that as well, Jennifer. Thank you.
And that would also affect the CAC membership as well, correct?
Good point, Jim. I think that it not necessarily, but in building the bigger box, I think we need to look at CAC as well.
Well, I mean, that a new entity would have at least one rep on the CAC, I would think, right?
But that's a good point. That's a very good point. So also with regard to CAC.
Okay, any other member comments? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, everybody. I guess to adjourn, still need a motion.
Move to adjourn.
I'll second.
And all in favor, say aye.
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 All right, God bless everybody and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Be safe. Bye-bye.